Hi everyone, my name is Mike Walsh and I'm the CEO of the Pacific Basin Economic Council. And I'm very pleased to join you today in talking a little bit about my background at the Pacific Basin Economic Council, what work we've been doing, and I've been asked to focus on one particular sector that I'm personally pleased to talk about, and that's aviation. So what is the Pacific Basin Economic Council? Well, we are a quasi think tank. We've been around, established since 1967. And our secretariat's been based in Hong Kong since 2003. And we're primarily a members-based organization made up of business leaders, chairmen, owners, entrepreneurs. And we get together on a regular basis to share insightful market information amongst our peers, sharing it and sort of focusing in on the topics that mean what we stand for at PBEC, which are things like sustainability and intellectual property rights, cross-border trade and data flows. So all the things that sort of drive economic development in the region amongst the 21 member states of APEC region. So I'm happy to sort of talk about one in particular sector. Now, PBEC is not sector specific, and it's really about focusing on those companies that trade is important to them, in particular cross-border international trade. And aviation is obviously a facilitator to all of that, and probably one of the worst affected sectors, unfortunately, during this COVID crisis as well. So when we look at aviation, and my background for the last 23 years is in the sector, what are the challenges going forward and opportunities? Obviously, this year has been one of its worst in its history for various reasons, with the pandemic spreading across the globe, where it originated in Asia back in early 2020. So when we look ahead, what are the main things that we need to look out for, either as investors, as entrepreneurs, and as just, part of the community? Like many of us want to just get back to traveling again internationally and seeing family, doing business trips, etc. But in a much more responsible way. I think this whole pandemic has given us a much needed wake-up call about environment. Now, aviation has sometimes try to defend itself that we are only a small percentage of the total carbon emission polluters. However, that percentage, albeit still fairly small in relation to other sectors, will increase probably exponentially because other sectors are addressing their own carbon footprints quite aggressively. Namely, land transportation, cars, trucks are moving towards biofuels and electric powered modes. Therefore, the aviation percentage will go up because the planes, as we know of today, are still in active service. They typically have a 25 to 30 year life cycle, so they're not going anywhere soon. So what are the opportunities, or what are the challenges that we need to address? And one is changing what we burn through the engines that power the aircraft. But coming back to the first topic today in aviation, the main thing that we all be focusing on for the last 9 months and going forward is the safe reopening of international borders for air travel. And during this recovery phase, both governments and citizens need some reassurance on traveling by air going forward. And whilst there is an increase in pockets over the summer, last summer, and now heading towards Christmas of air travel demand, it's mainly been focused on people still doing some repatriation flights or really urgent, really essential travel as well. So the whole tourism of leisure is badly affected still. So IATA, which is the International Airline Transportation Association, they have been working with other organizations, including the likes of PBEC, under the APEC Transportation Working Group. And they've come up with an initiative amongst its members of the IATA Travel Pass. And this is also building on their work, which they did with the One ID initiative, which is basically going to this touchless travel concept, which now is so important with this COVID pandemic. And it allows everybody through an application to have their lab tests there and validated, as well as validating your own personal information. So the ease of travel, when you arrive at the airport, a lot of it is already pre-loaded into the system and pre-checked. So when you go to the check-in counter, which I can also share with you, is beginning to go humanless and touchless as well. But that will take some time in all airports, but you'll see it in some of the major hubs like Singapore and Changi introducing this new technology. So really it's kind of like just scanning either a barcode or a QR code like they do in mainland China, and that gives you then an instant response that allows you then to proceed to the next stage. And hopefully the green, as in China they're used to allow you to proceed. There are other warnings though, that if something wasn't quite right, that needs to be addressed, and that could then be a warning flag for those traveling and allow those to go and get retested again before they proceed to traveling. So that's on the passenger side, the initiatives of looking at safe, trusted return to international travel for passengers. But what we've seen also on the cargo side is a huge increase in demand for air cargo, even though the supply side has been reduced during the COVID period. E-commerce is one of the big factors driving that demand, and we're going to continue to see that grow over the next couple of years as air travel becomes back online. The cargo rates will start to come down, but freighters will also be increasing their supply. You've seen probably in the news some aircraft types like the 747, the Boeing aircraft have been retired, as has the Airbus A380, these big aircraft, and some will be going over to the freighter side. But where the demand is for cargo freight is really in that medium haul, and you're going to see the likes of the Airbus A330 and the Boeing 757-200 series moving into the freighter, being snapped up by the passengers side as they've been retired or are in the desert right now, some of them parked to be bought, and then they're going to be converted to freighters. So that's an area that is definitely in some ways benefited from the demand, and the demand will not go away. As you know, the phase we're into now is going to be, as vaccines are approved, the distribution of those vaccines globally is a major undertaking, and a lot of that will be done initially by air freight, followed by trucking to the final destination and last mile logistics. So when will we see a return to what people call the new norm? There's different commentators on this. If you look at Europe and the likes of the CEO of Ryanair, one of the largest carriers in the world, they are predicting that volumes will return in the summer of 2021, but the revenues won't return until probably 2023. So there'll be a steady increase of pricing over the period, but there'll be definitely some price incentives to get people back flying in the first 12 months from summer onwards of next year. Now, one of the few markets that has been kind of not heard about so much, but if you're an expert like myself, we keep our ear to the ground with people like McKinsey reporting on this. Now, in mainland China, large domestic markets like China and even the US, recovery has seen a better figures coming back in terms of air travel. And China in particular, with some of these initiatives, with the QR code, the green, amber and red schemes, allows domestic travel to have got back to pre-COVID levels already in the first 6 months since China got on top of this pandemic domestically. So that's encouraging for other countries, but certainly where I am in Hong Kong, it doesn't really help because we are an island and every flight is international. So we're really bound on destination countries and our own being at a level that's acceptable in terms of COVID infection rates for air travel to return in greater number. Obviously, one of the big inhibitors is the quarantine, 14-day period at either end or at one end. And that will start to go away, we hope, with this schemes coming in, the more stringent track and trace, and taking the vaccine, obviously, from 2021 onwards. but obviously there's still an unknown factor of, you know, peaks and troughs, and whether some countries will still be struggling to get on top of the spread enough or allowing for more routes to be reopening. So the second part I'd like to quickly touch upon is, what are we doing about our environmental footprint as an aviation sector? Well, there's been a lot of talk in recent months, and Airbus has announced, you know, the 2035 moonshot of moving to hydrogen-powered long-haul aircraft or medium-haul aircraft. And that's a big statement. And hydrogen has been looked at for some time. But realistically, as I mentioned before, we're still using conventional aircraft and conventional engines powered by Jet A1 fuel for the foreseeable future, at least through 2035 anyway, till hydrogen becomes more stable in its transportation and the cost of producing it in large scale, etc., and all the challenges that are met with that. So what is the bridging solution? And what I endorse, and what PBEC has been supporting along with some of its members and at APEC, is the sustainable aviation fuel solution. Now, sustainable aviation fuel is a mix of traditional fuel and feedstocks that are fed into the process at the refinery level. And then obviously that produces a fuel that produces far less carbon emissions and other harmful emissions as a byproduct of jet fuel burn. So sustainable aviation fuel has been literally taking off, excuse the pun, in the California state of the US, where they introduced the low carbon fuel standard being applicable to aviation. It's predominantly been focused on ground transportation, but that was then adopted to include aviation fuel. And that has really spurned a lot of the oil refineries to focus on developing their SAF products. Now, SAF can be supplied by ethanol as a byproduct of sugarcane, or use cooking oil and other feedstocks that can be less harmful to the environment in the what we call now the circular economy process. And we welcome that. And a few of the leaders like Neste from Finland have, together with the Singapore government, got an oil refinery in Singapore producing SAF, and that will be doubling its output by 2023. So what is PBEC looking to do and endorse is the local market demand and reducing the price, the premium price right now that exists in producing SAF per US gallon versus conventional fuel. And to do that, we need more incentives and to work with the policymakers at all government levels in order to understand that we need to work together between the private sector and the public sector to get accelerated collaboration that will enable the increased production required to get SAF price down and more use going up. We still account today for less than 1% in terms of SAF globally being used in the aviation sector. So it's a huge opportunity to grow that up to 15–20% of total fuel burn by 2030, we hope, or even sooner, and then go from there. I mean, there are many solutions. It's not the silver bullet solution, but it's one of many solutions, and it's the most viable one today because it utilizes existing infrastructure at airports. It's available and can be produced at mass given the right incentives. So thank you for listening to me today. I hope that given you some food for thought, and we encourage you to get involved with organizations like PBEC, which are an NGO, and really advocating on behalf of business, whatever sector you're in, on the cutting edge technology, AI, blockchain, renewables, in what we like to now push is the digital economy, which is becoming more and more circular. So thank you for joining me. Take care. Bye-bye for now.